Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bang on Sales Show. I'm your host, Mark Bangs, and today my guest is Céline Dabert. She is the Sales Enablement Manager at Sendbird. So a little bit about Celine. Celine is a builder as well as a sales enablement manager, she says. So as a builder, Celine likes helping companies to scale and grow. In her current role at Sendbird, this has meant playing a number of different roles, which is, I guess, is quite common, including creating personalized training programs for people, curating and developing content for the sales team, building out onboarding programs, and operationalizing enablement for the EMEA team. How are you doing, Celine? Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Mark. And hi, everyone. So yeah, as Mark mentioned, I've been working in sales enablement for, I think, almost 6 years now. So it's like time running very fast. And I'm currently working in a company called Sendbird and really supporting the EMEA team and also the US team recently. So it's really like creating all the content to support the team, creating training programs, making sure they are like receiving the right support, the right information they need to do the role. So it's like very exciting time to be in sales enablement, I think, with like a lot of changing going on. And it's what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
Great. There's one thing that we didn't mention in this introduction, and it's something that we spoke about before recording, and it's this idea of connecting the dots between different teams, that alignment of departments. Could you talk a bit about that at the moment? Because I know that at the moment some areas of the business are probably frantic, that the economic conditions at the moment and so on and so forth. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically most of the time what you're going to face in a company is like different teams working in silos. So you really have like all those teams working on different projects, different new processes, program or whatever. And all this is really going to impact the sales team at some point. But sometimes what happens if you don't have sales enablement is like everyone is going to throw everything at the sales team, and the sales team is going to be like, whoa, wait a minute, it's like too much. I don't think I need this instead. So I think the role of like a sales enablement manager is really to make sure that you're here to understand what other departments, other teams are working on. You can be like, okay, this is how it's going to impact the sales team. And then like be proactive on this and be like, okay, I need to talk to you because I think, for example, it's not the right timing to launch this new process for the sales team because it's the end of the quarter and they need to focus on quota and ARR and those kind of stuff. So it's really like your role is to make sure that every time you hear something that you know is going to impact the sales team, it's like to be proactive, to jump in and to be like, okay, hold on, this is what we need to do for the sales team. Or even maybe talk with like sales manager or VP of sales to be like, okay, I know this new process is coming soon. This is going to impact your team. What do you think? So you're really like a bit in the middle of everything, and you need to make sure everything makes sense for the sales team at the end of the day. Like you're aware of everything going on. And so the information comes to the sales team at the right moment.
That's really interesting. I was actually just yesterday speaking to the director of revenue enablement at Pleo, and he was talking about the difference between sales enablement and revenue enablement, and this is probably open to some interpretation, but he sort of distinguished the two by saying that revenue enablement it encompasses more than just sales, right? It's that whole customer journey, whatever you want to call it, including after the sale. I guess that's not really what you're talking about, but I'd imagine that there's an element of that in what you're doing, because it's about not just sales, is it? You're trying to factor in a lot of other moving parts.
Yeah, it's completely right. Because, for example, if you're like in sales enablement and you focus only on sales, like you're like supporting the sales team only, but let's just say you're like SDR or BDR, depending on how to call it, like pre-sale team change their process. Even if you're not like technically supporting this team, this will probably impact your sales team. So you need to be proactive in like, okay, I know something is happening in like other revenue teams that's going to impact the sales team. Here is going to happen. So I think even if you don't support all the like spectrum of revenue in a company, you still need to be aware of like what's going on, how it's going to impact the sales team, or maybe some like if you have like, for example, a new process impacting the customer success team, for example, it may not impact your sales team, but you still need to make sure they're aware of this, because maybe the way they sell a product may change because of that. So I think your role is really to make sure that basically you should know like everything a bit what's going on in like each team, And you should make the decision on like, okay, this is important for the sales team. They should know about this, or like, okay, fine, I don't need to mention that because it's going to be noise for them and they don't need to know that. So it's really like making the decision of like what they need to know, what moment basically.
Is it a two-way line of communication as well? Because I'd imagine that there'll be certain initiatives that, whether it's senior, management in the business or other departments, they want to add a new feature to your product or, launch some kind of initiative. And you almost need to feed that back to them to say, hey, wait, this isn't essential, or this isn't what customers necessarily are saying they want. I guess it goes both ways, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because also I think as sales enablement, we hear from the sales team a lot. Like they like see us as people they can mention like, oh, like I think I have a problem with this process or with this product. Like I don't think it's fit for like the customer or the prospect we're trying to targeting. And sometimes when like company launch like new processes or new product or features, they can have like a disconnection between like what the sales team is seeing on the field and what they want to release. So it's really important to be like to like feedback what you hear from the sales team to the right team, to be like, okay, this is what we are hearing. Maybe we need to like tweak things a little bit.
Yeah.
It's really important to be like you mentioned, like really the middleman between that. If you hear something from the sales team, you need to talk to like the right departments or the right teams, because otherwise it's like no one is talking to each other and it can't really work very well.
Yeah, and that includes, I'd imagine, what training do they need? What content should be producing? So it could be marketing, it could be dev teams, it could be like product teams, whatever. So hence the number of different hats that you have to wear, I guess. Yeah. So so another thing I was curious to talk to you about, Celine, was it's not easy at the moment out there for sellers, right? I know this firsthand. It's hard enough, and it's getting harder just to spark a conversation with with sort of senior level stakeholders. Particularly as you're selling into perhaps larger organization, larger mid-market enterprise organizations. Yeah, not to labor the point, but it's getting harder. So I was curious, perhaps starting at the start of say prospecting, for example. Yeah, I wanted to throw maybe a few examples at you and just sort of understand what you and your team are doing at the moment to overcome that. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to throw the word prospecting out there. Tell me what your thoughts are.
I think prospecting is really challenging at the moment, and it's the same for everyone, because when you're trying to reach out to a prospect and you're like, here it's Sendbird, we're selling this and this. If the prospect like doesn't have really like an issue to solve around your product, they're just going to ignore you basically, because everyone is really looking at the budget at the moment. Do I really need this tool or this tool? So it's really challenging because of that. And when it comes to prospecting, it's very easy to like, you can send like 100,000 emails every day to I don't know how many cold calls or stuff like this, but have no result. And it can be really frustrating for the sales team, because like they are being proactive, they are doing stuff, but if they don't see any result, it's very easy to want to give up. And I think it's a very normal reaction to like not seeing any result. So I think it's where sales enablement can really step in to be like, okay, prospecting is challenging right now, how we can support. So really trying to check, like, are they using the right messaging? Are they using the right tools, the right the right training to how to talk to some prospect depending on the industry, on the market? Because it's very easy to have like sales team that going to send like 100 of emails, maybe with like not the right messaging, not the right personalizations. And you need to step in to understand, okay, this is what you've been doing. Let's try to do something a bit different. Maybe we will see different results. And also, I think it's quite important to work on collaboration for this. So working with like marketing, product marketing, to understand like what is the messaging they should be using, but also collaboration between different sales teams. So I know in my case, I have sales team in EMEA, in APAC region, in the US, and maybe some stuff are working very well in one region. And the question is, can we replicate that maybe here in Europe? Or maybe something is working very well in like Asia, can we also replicate in the US? And it's really important to understand what each team is doing, what's working, and try to replicate. Sometimes it won't work, but it's also key to make sure the sales team talk between them, because I think when you're sales reps, you tend to be really like in your own world, sometimes really focusing on your account, your prospecting, everything. But sometimes talking with your colleagues, yeah, exactly, it can be like, oh, this is how you're doing it. Wait, I never tried this, or I never used this tool before. Let me try. And maybe you can see different results. Or if you have a sales website really performing in terms of prospecting, ask him to like present his like workflow to his colleague or stuff like this. It's also good for the sales rep because it's always good to like shine a bit in front of your team, but also to like make sure you replicate the success you're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're big on that here at Lego. The best practice sharing, right? Is if someone's doing something and it's working, let everybody else know. Why not? Right? It's it's in everyone's best interest. Are there are there common sort of themes and trends that you're seeing? I guess across regions for the more successful sellers at Sendbird. What are they doing that's working?
So I would say two things. The first one is they are using the tool we're providing, because I think sometimes what's happening with sales is you provide all the tools and you're like, oh, it's so great, and then you reuse it again.
Yeah.
So the successful ones are really using the tool we're providing in, I would say, a very efficient way, and they know how to use them. And so they are like also not like wasting time with like doing like manual stuff. So that's one of the first thing, is really using the right tool for prospecting. And the other one will be they're really good at seeing what the pain point they are trying to solve for the prospect or the customer. Like, because if you just send an email being like, I work on this company and we do this, I can guarantee no one is really going to answer to this. But if you like really point at like, this is probably the issue you're facing because this is the issue we are seeing in your industry, this is how we can fix this, that's going to be already a different approach. And some people are really good to understand, okay, in this market in particular, they are facing this issue at the moment. This is how we fit in, and they can articulate this in a very good way. And so in this case, the perspective is going to be like, oh, wait a minute, it's true, we have this issue, like then it's correct for us. So they will be more, I think, inclined to organize at least a first meeting to discuss like, what do you do, how you can fix that. Yeah. So I'd say at least where I work, it's what I see. It's really like sales using the right tools and using like the right messaging, pointing at like the issues some companies are facing.
Yeah, and so just to add to that, so to tools and messaging, I think on tools it's important to, I like to stay lean, so to speak, and not overcomplicate it. And I say that because that's a tendency of mine. Oh, this looks interesting. Some new like Chat GPT thing. Oh, I'll go and check that out. But it's a distraction, and 9 times out of 10, it's not really going to move the needle. So yes, use the right ones, but don't go after the next shiny new object, right? And I think the second thing as well, what you're saying about messaging, it's really interesting because I'm experiencing this, and I'm hearing this from any successful organization. They're following very similar approach to what you're talking about. Lead with relevance, but the relevance is the challenges, the pains, the issues that organizations are facing, or that individual people in their world, in their role, what they're facing, right? And then how you overcome that. So yeah, that's amazing. So what about beyond the initial conversations? It's easy to lose a grasp. You think, oh, that was a great, we had a great discovery, or you demo your product, whatever. You do a couple of calls, and then suddenly radio silence. What do you overcome in that?
This one is also very challenging because once you get a call, everything goes well, they are showing interest in your product, and then they ghost you, like you never hear about them. And I think so there are two aspects of this again. I think the first one is, are you talking to the right person? Because sometimes you may be like, oh yeah, this person like fit the persona we have or whatever, but maybe they're not the one making decision or like looking after the budget or whatever. And so they talk to you and they're like, oh yeah, look, your product looks great, but because I'm not making any decision and I know we're not buying anything anyway, I don't see really the point of like talking to you again. So during the first call, is really important to make sure that, is there anyone else I need to talk to? Like, who will be the right person? Because the first one may not be the right one, but who is going to be your champion? And make sure you're not talking to only one person too, because it's very easy to lose a deal, I think, if you focus only on one person. So it's trying to understand, okay, and you can't really ask that many questions on the first call, I also get that, but trying to understand who is going to be like the decision maker, I think is quite key. And I think the second aspect is, again, make your research on the company, on the industry, because what I've noticed for like the successful first call we have is really prospect being quite impressed, or like, wait, you know the company very well, you know my industry very well. I want to work with you because you seem to be keen to understand my issue and how you can fix that, how you can make me successful in my own company.
Yeah.
So it's really important to like make your research in terms of like data, pain point, issue they are facing, like what the competition is doing. Like if you are talking to like a food delivery in Europe, like Deliveroo, like do you know what like Uber Eats is doing? So maybe you can also play with that. Like, oh, I know your like competitors are doing this and this. Are you doing the same thing? And so it's how you are going to hook a little bit the person you're talking to really like, it's easy, and you're a salesperson, so it's really easy to act like a salesperson, but I think you should act like an expert in the field more than a salesperson. Like you're here to support, to help them to solve their issue. Yes, at the end of the day, you want to sell your product, fair enough. But if the prospect see you as like a partner, like an expert that can really like support their team, support them, it's going to be a way different conversation, I think, that just the sales guy or the sales woman being like, oh yeah, I need to sell something, I want you to buy my product. It's going to be a whole different conversation. And I think you can level up also like the people you're talking to very easily, like maybe some VP, C-level, and it's a completely different conversation.
This is music to my ears. We are 100% on the same page. You know, this is like challenger sales stuff. It's you know, it's going in, and I think to some extent you need to you need to earn the right to do this, but it's going in with and saying, hey, look, we speak to people in your role every day of the week. Here's what we're hearing. Here's what we're seeing in the market, in your industry or whatever, and leading with some kind of insight. So yeah, I think that's amazing. I really do. And it positions you as that sort of trusted expert rather than the seller. And it's a mindset thing as well. So yeah, 100%. Just to go back slightly, Celine, we were touched on multi-threading, you know, having more people on the customer side involved in a deal. I'm going to get really specific and tactical here because it's something that this is for my own self-interest at the moment, because it's something that is on my mind with some things I'm working on. When do you, and I don't know if you have an answer for this question, but when do you ask that question? Because for me, if I'm having an initial conversation with somebody, I would normally wait until later on in that you know, towards the end of the call when we're discussing any potential next steps. But what I found is that often it's a little too late to do that, because you may only have a few minutes left. They might have a hard stop at the top of the hour or something. And suddenly it's like, I actually didn't get you know, I might have only had 3 really key questions, and that's probably one of them. I didn't get the answer. Yeah. Do you have a sort of tactical answer for that?
It's a hard one. I think it's really one of the key questions you should ask on the first, at least trying to understand the decision process in the company. Like if, for example, you have someone who's going to be like, oh, our VP of finance is really hard on like signing anything or whatever, at least you know it may be like an issue going forward. So I think for this question, I know it's going to be a very simple answer, but make sure you have time. Like make sure your presentation is like short and quick at the beginning. And so make sure you have time for Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
And it should be, I think, one of the first questions. I mean, of course, depending on how the conversation is going, but one of the first questions will be like, if we move forward in this process, who else do I need to be in contact with? Like, for example, like who will be the person like implementing the product or making the budget decision or whatever. So I think making sure you have time for question is really key, because in my opinion, if you don't have time for any question after the first call, I have a feeling you may not have a second one. You know, it's like, because you don't have this conversation going on.
Yeah.
So that would be one first point. And I think the second one is, let's just say you really didn't have time for this question. Like the meeting is over and like, okay, I didn't have time for this question. What I would do in this case is when you send your follow-up email after the first meeting, ask, okay, I can make another call with you on the 7th of July. Can you let me know who else needs to be involved in the call to make sure we start talking about more like strategic conversation and stuff like this? So trying to be like, or even if you heard like, oh, I heard you mention head of product during the call, like, can you include them in the next call we can have or something like this? So maybe try to use a follow-up with this and make sure those key people are involved in the second call. And really, like, if you don't see anyone else involved in the second call, like, really ask during the second call, really be like, okay, we have this conversation together, but now I need to know, like, who else is going to be working on the project, who is going to make the decision around this. And but I think by the end of the second call, at least you should know, like, who else should be involved in your process. So that's my 2 cents on this. I'm hoping it's answering your question, but I think it's how you should try to do it.
Yeah, no, that's great, and you've got the wheels turning in my head now because I was listening to Jason Bay's podcast. He had a guest. I feel bad because I can't remember the name of the guest, but the guest was basically saying, and it goes along with the challenger sale stuff that we were just talking about. It's even saying something like, Celine, typically working with organizations similar to yourself, we normally find that it's important to get your VP of sales and potentially CMO involved. This is where our customers have typically seen the most success in implementation, blah, blah, blah. So it's actually prescribing it and then maybe asking their thoughts on that, something like that. It's a little bit more prescriptive.
Yeah.
But yeah. Interesting. Okay. So what are you working on at the moment? Bit of a left turn, but what's the big focus at Sendbird right now?
I think the focus is really to make sure we support the sales team because it's really challenging for them at the moment out there. And it's very easy to feel like everything you're doing is not really producing any result. So my role at the moment is really to make sure that I support the team and I understand their needs. And like, okay, do you need any training specific? Like, for example, are you struggling in the negotiation step? So in this case, you need negotiation training. So really trying to be as close as possible as a sales team is really key. So it's something I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to, like, for London, it's quite easy because we go to the office, so I can talk to them. But for the US team, I'm really trying to be involved in their world a little bit more, like trying to attend team meetings and stuff like this, and trying really to make sure as a sales enablement, you have this connection with the sales team to understand that challenge. Another thing we're working on is also making sure we are using the right tools, because I think it's the same everywhere else. Everyone looking at the budget and everyone is like, do we really need this specific tool for this? And it's really need to make sure as sales enablement that, okay, we have all those tools. How do you use it? How are you use them to be efficient in your role? So making sure your sales team is trained, like they're aware of the tools you have, and making sure they can use them, for example, prospecting or stuff like this is also really key. And I would say the third thing is around metrics and like key metrics. Because it's very easy when you work in sales enablement to create a lot of content, create a lot of training program and do all those stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like what the outcome you're trying to like produce and what are you trying to see. And it's really key when you want to launch, I would say, any new program, any new tool, any new training. Okay, what the metrics we're going to track to show success, what the behavior we're trying to make sure the sales team is applying on their day-to-day work, but really trying to make sure you track success and you can really show the value you bring as sales enablement is also really key. So, and I know it's really easy when like everything is urgent to not think about this, to be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to schedule this training and we see after what's going on, but trying to like take a step back and think, okay, what is the key metrics I'm going to like influence here? Like what the lag metrics that's really important for like the VP of sales, the CRO, and what the lean metrics I can influence to like move the needle in the right direction and really show like, yeah, the sales team is being successful and here is how sales enablement involved in this success.
Yeah. How do you approach from a sort of data or metrics point of view? How do you approach that?
So in my case, it's really trying to understand which metrics the VP of sales or the CRO are tracking. So, like anything like pipeline, ARR, like, I would say the classic stuff, I think, for every companies. And okay, this has a lag metrics. And as enablement, what are the lead metrics? So like I would say like really the metric like showing success, like showing you're going to the right direction. Which one can I like influence? So for example, if the company is big on pipeline, as sales enablement, I can maybe track like activities from the sales team. I can track tools usage. I can track, did they attend some, like if I organize a training, did they attend the training? Like, small stuff like this. So I think it's really important if you understand what's important for like leadership team, C-level, then it's easier to like understand the metrics you need to track and like how you need to articulate your like training program or like project plan you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you start with the big, what would you call them, OKRs or something like that, the business objectives, then break that down into smaller KPIs, that sort of thing. Yeah. How do you actually link that to show the value of the work that sales enablement is doing, though? Because you obviously anyone can measure some number of dials or meetings booked and put that on a dashboard or revenue, but how are you attributing that to your work?
So something you can do is, so for example, you're like scheduling a training, next week, trying to see what the metric is right now, like today, what the data is look like, for example, in terms of like sales activity, they are sending, I don't know, 100 emails per week. Okay, that's the data right now. Then you have your meeting, your training again, you have your training, and then you track the after. So, okay, after the training, they've been sending 200 emails per week. And we start seeing an increase in like meetings, like first meeting they are having. So it's how you can really show the impact. Is really if you can have the before metrics and the after metrics, after you launch on your project, your training or whatever, it's how you will see the impact. You will see this is what after we work on it, and this is before we work on it. And so you can be like, you can see a difference. So you can see our training or program really had an impact. Of course, you will always have like other factors playing into the metrics you're tracking. But I think it's a really good way to like show like something was happening, I did something, now it's better. It's like very simple like this. And it's how you can like really show like the impact you have as enablement.
Yeah, interesting. And another thing you said at the start of that was about working with a different, like the US team, for example. I want to say how again, because obviously you've got time zones to consider. And as you mentioned, selling into the US market is very different to selling into different countries across EMEA. How are you kind of staying present with them, given those factors?
So the first one would be every time they have like team meetings, trying to be there. It's not always possible with time zone different, but to be fair, they are quite good to make sure it's also scheduled in my time zone. So really trying to be involved in those team meetings to understand like the challenges they're facing, the requests they have, and also trying to like build a relationship with the leadership team. So like sales, like manager, VP of sales, because they are also the one that understand what the team needs. So I have catch up with them on a regular basis to make sure like I understand what their need is at the moment, what their team needs or anything like this. And also the good thing with like new tools like Slack or like Teams or on Microsoft or stuff like this is it's very easy for them to contact you and be like, oh, I need this and this, and then to like make sure like you can answer very quickly. Like it doesn't have to be a call every time. It's like could be a quick Slack message. So it's also on the easy one. So I think it's really just important to build this trusted relationship with them because they know they can reach out to you and they know like, okay, it's quite late for this person because she's based in London, but I know she will answer to me tomorrow. So you have this trust being built. And I think it's really key because at least they know like, okay, right now it's midnight for her. She may not answer, but they know that you will come back to them the day after when it's your like time to work. So I think, it's really key to, if you can be involved in like team meetings that are not like crazy outside of your time zone, do it. And also try to build the relationship with the sales leadership team. It will really help you to understand what's going on.
Okay. And the final one you mentioned was around tech and tools and so on. Now, doing what I do with the Lego, I know that tech stack consolidation is a big thing for a lot of organizations at the moment, for a number of reasons, obviously budget, efficiencies, and so on. I mean, what's kind of the big driving force behind that?
So I think, like you mentioned, it's also like regarding the budget and everything, but it's also making sure the sales team is being efficient because it's really good to have like 100 of tools, but if no one is using anything beyond the budget question, it's really like what the point really, like maybe they will use only one tool and they are not going to even use it properly and they don't know they can maybe use two tools together and be really more efficient. So it's really like asking yourself the question, why are they not using all the tools we have? Is it because they're not trained, because they don't know we have those tools, or because they think the tools is not the right for the problem they are trained they have, or anything like this? So it's really important to understand if a tool is not being used, why? Is it something you can fix, like more training, awareness around the tool, or is it like because the tool sorry for this, is it because the tool is like not the right one for the situation, basically? So I think it's quite important to really understand how many tools do you have, how many really your sales team need, and then make a decision around this. If you need to like remove some tools, maybe it's the right one at the moment. If you need to maybe buy a new one, maybe it's also okay. Or maybe if you can't buy a new one, okay, what do I have? How do I use it at the best? And how can I make sure I enable the sales team to use those tools?
Yeah. Wow. We've covered quite a lot, haven't we? It's amazing. Yeah. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, Celine, because there's so many. I've got about another 10 questions in my mind I want to ask you, but yeah, we're coming up to time shortly. So yeah, no, thank you for this. Are there any do you have any closing thoughts? Any anything you'd like to shout about? Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's challenging at the moment for everyone, but it's also a very good time to be in sales enablement, because you can really be part of the challenge and really like help to support the leadership team, support your company, and making sure, the sales team is being very efficient, they have the right training, the right tool, and you can really be part of this. It's not always easy because it's hard as enablement to have your voice being heard sometimes, to have your seat at the table. But once you can do that, it's a really good feeling to be like, I'm supporting the team, I'm helping the company to be successful. I'm also helping like people to be successful in their role. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to be successful. I think the sales team really want, to like make their quota, like reach their target. And you can be part of this. And I think it's really like rewarding also for enablement to be part of this. And even if it can be hard to show the value you're bringing, really try to focus on this, because you can really show like, this is what I'm bringing to the table. This is how I support the company. And it's how you can also progress in your career, or even learn a lot, I think, on your role and what the company is doing.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, what I'm taking from that is, believe in your own value and your own ability, but at the same time, you do need to measure it and demonstrate it to the whatever business you're in. Yeah, and there was a third thing, but my mind's gone blank. That's not good, is it? And we're live. But yeah, no, 100% agree. Absolutely. Well, look, thanks, Celine. Really enjoyed this. I learned a couple of things as well. So yeah, much appreciated. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Oh, LinkedIn would be the best place if you want to send like a connection request or a message. Feel free to do so. I'm happy to connect, to talk to, even if you're not based in London or in Europe, it's fine, like from everywhere in the world. But yeah, feel free to use LinkedIn if you want to connect. Yeah.
Great. Okay, brilliant. Same goes for me as well. If you want to hear me complain about the weather every time we we talk.
I mean, UK, so.
Yeah, it's a national pastime, isn't it? So brilliant. Thanks, Celine. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.